I'm Ruth Ann Norden,
And I'm Janet Syas Nitsick.
and we are still talking about the stages of writing, but this is part two, and this is about research.
Right. Um, and how do we do the research? We can do it many different ways. You don't need it if you're basically doing contemporary, unless you're doing like a crime novel or you need some background information. Like I was talking to a group last night about internet. We all know the internet. Well, not everybody. There's still a few people who don't even have internet, believe it or not. But we might not know programming, and maybe there's something in our novel that we need the programming part, so you need to interview somebody that does that kind of thing. So there still needs some research maybe for certain stories, but we are living in today, so we don't need to do it like if you're doing historical, and both of us do
Although,
historical.
as a quick note, I remember, I think for the Langoliers by Stephen King, okay, I think he said he did, like, he actually spent time with a pilot because it was about flying. That was part of the plot. So, you actually talk to people maybe in the profession that you're doing. That's a possible research thing.
Right.
Instead of just going on the internet talking to someone that's actually in a certain business that you're doing.
That's right. You need those hands-on interviews are just a lot of authors use those when they're looking for information. And like you were doing a medical story, if maybe you need to meet with the public relations person there so you can get some background. Because believe me, if you don't have it right, they're going to tell you.
Right.
When you're
There's
out
always
there.
someone who's going to review your book.
Yeah. So so you do need some. It's just not like if you're going back into history, you've got to do a lot more.
We always think that historical is always research, but it's also contemporary too. But you were going to talk about. I mean, now that we kind of talked about a little bit of this, you were going to talk more about maybe digging into the historical.
Right.
How people could do that.
Yeah, and you really need to get a feel for the time period. You got to remember that, what things were like during that time period, and it really helps to get acquainted with that time period, so that when you're describing it accurately. So people, when they step into that novel or they step into that story, they really feel like they're living that time period.
And this is why I like tours. If you can take like a guided tour of like an old house or an old town, and then they could, like, in that fits your time period.
Oh yeah.
And then they can like give you all kinds of, this is what people were eating, this is how they were living, and chamber pots under the beds. I mean, think about stuff you don't think about today.
Right. And I think sometimes the big ones you can't maybe ask them as much questions, but some of the smaller places that you can go, historical homes, they'll give you information like what they used, because you didn't have electricity, and what kind of hand elements they used, so that you can kind of really understand it. Right. And then if you can, take photos of them. Some places won't let you take photos inside.
Yeah,
but
some
of
them have copyrighted this stuff, so copyright protected, so you can't.
But other ones you can, then you can go back, and then that helps you describe certain things.
Right.
And then I was at my first novel, Lockets and Lanterns. I was actually at a historical church, and I took notes as she's coming down the aisle. I know that's not very nice, but I was. And
you were like at a wedding taking notes. Huh?
Yes, exactly.
This is a writer. The mark of a writer. You're going to make notes while you're at someone's
wedding.
Right,
but it was at a historical church. The church had been outside of St. Louis and had been in existence before the Civil War, closed down during the Civil War, and reopened and then closed permanently in 1920. But it's just like it was. You go in there, and now it just has weddings and special things that you have. But it had the kerosene lamps, the ceiling lamps. And then it had the pews like you'd have them, hard, believe me, hard, and not much room in front of you. So all the in the altar and all those things. So it helps you describe it. And then I could take photos from the outside, and it was gray stone, and then it gave me inspiration. And my first scene is a lot of that information I got from just being there.
In fact, we were talking earlier that sometimes a guided tour like that, especially if someone can tell you something about the time period and everything, that's kind of worth a couple of books. Mm-hmm. Really, I mean, because you really get a feel for it when you're in that setting. But I guess if you can't be, then what do you do?
Well, you always can get things off the internet and get some pictures and get some old rooms and Google it and get a lot of things that you can use to describe and things like that. You can. But the hands-on is really, really nice. It really is. It gives you really more. Seeing it vividly is better than just the internet. But the internet will get you suffice. Will suffice,
right. And so let's see.
Historical societies are also very good.
Yeah.
about getting you information. They will give you old stories from that time period, like for my Lockets and Lanterns, he gave me stories from the Omaha Bee that no longer exists, but the Omaha Bee is in my last story, because
Is that
it
where
was.
you get a beehive thing from for
No,
part
no.
one?
But anyway, so yeah,
Okay.
so there's some things that you can get through the historical side that they'll give you to you. They're very cooperative, and so look for your local historical side, because they can really, and they'll sit down with you and really help you. They're very, very nice people.
And as another note, I don't know how you do it, but for me, when I write, I just start the book, and then when I'm like, I need to know something historically, I'll just at that point I'll go and check it out, or sometimes I'll highlight it and make a note to go back and check later on and keep writing, so then I can go back at a later date.
Initially, when I first did my first novel, I needed to read to get the time period really.
So you research first on your first one.
On my first one, but after that, you have a feel for that time period, and you can do more like what you're talking about.
But
when you have a when you have a
That's not necessarily
yeah.
best.
I mean, it's just whatever works. They do say though, a lot of people make the mistake of doing all the research and they never get to writing. So you got to be careful that you're not over researching, and so you have your time to write, because that's the most important thing. But get your kind of feel for it. But then if you have questions, go and Google them. Thank God we have Google and stuff like that today, because no wonder it took 10 to 15 years to do a book for some people. But you still got libraries too. Don't forget, though, that resource too is always out there.
So maybe the best thing to do then is set up a deadline. Like, I'll set aside so many days to research, but after that, I got to start writing a book. Even if you haven't found exactly what you're looking for, start the book. Because that's the most important thing. If you don't start the book, you'll never finish it.
Right, and you can get so caught in the research you don't get anything else done.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay, and then part 3 will be on the actual writing.
Right.
Of the book, right?
Right, exactly.